Get out, you old farts. You're ruining our Christmas, our son-in-law yelled, slamming the door of our own home. My wife and I quietly packed and drove to our little forest cabin to spend the holidays alone. But on Christmas morning, his panicked call came. What the hell? Why are you on the front page of the newspaper? Why does the whole county know now? The consequences for those who thought old age was something to be ashamed of turned out far louder than they ever imagined.
Before continuing, subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is in your region right now.
My name is Howard Harrison. I'm 68 years old, and I've lived in Kalispell, Montana, my entire life. Spent 32 years as sheriff of Flathead County before I retired with honors. These days, I carve wooden figurines in my garage workshop. Animals, toys for the children's shelter, sometimes furniture. It keeps my hands busy and my mind sharp. But the best thing that ever happened to me wasn't the badge or the respect of my community. It was Virginia. We met 45 years ago at a county fair. She was 20, standing by the rose display, explaining to some confused farmer why his roses weren't blooming. I walked over, pretending I needed gardening advice. I didn't own a single plant, but I needed an excuse to talk to the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. Virginia has this way about her, warm as summer sunshine, but underneath that softness is steel. She taught history at the local high school for 28 years. Half the town's adults were her students. They still wave at her in the grocery store, still call her Mrs. Harrison with genuine affection. We live at 847 Cedar Lane, a two-story house I bought in 1978. Virginia and I raised our daughter Laura here, watched her take her first steps in the living room, saw her off to prom from that front porch. 2 years ago, Laura and her husband Kevin asked if they could move in temporarily. Kevin had lost his job, or so he claimed. What kind of father says no to his daughter? Kevin Brennan, 41 years old, mid-level manager at an agricultural equipment company now. He comes from money. His parents live in a big house in Billings, and he's never let us forget it. The first time I met him 8 years ago, he looked around our home like he was inspecting a fixer-upper. I could read it on his face. Provincial. Small town. Beneath him. Virginia noticed it first. She always sees through people. There's something cold behind his eyes, Howard, she told me after that first dinner. He looks at Laura like she's a possession, not a partner. I should have listened harder. The temporary stay stretched into months, then years. Kevin started acting like he owned the place. He rearranged my workshop without asking, started suggesting what Virginia should cook. Our daughter just went along with it. The sweet girl who used to help her mother in the garden became someone who avoided eye contact, who made excuses for her husband's behavior. He's just stressed, Dad. Kevin didn't mean it that way. I understood him perfectly. I'd interrogated plenty of manipulators during my years as sheriff. Kevin was textbook. It was a Sunday, 3 days before Christmas, when things finally broke. I was in the kitchen helping Virginia prepare for the holidays. The house smelled like cinnamon and pine. Then Kevin walked in with his phone pressed to his ear. He ended the call and looked at us like we were unexpected house guests. "So my parents are coming for Christmas," he announced. "That's lovely," Virginia said carefully. "We'll have plenty of room. Actually," Kevin held up his hand, "Mom and Dad aren't comfortable around older people. It makes the holiday awkward. All the medical talk, the slow conversations. You know how it is." I set down the potato peeler. "What exactly are you saying, Kevin?" He smiled. That condescending smile I'd grown to despise. "I'm saying it would be better if you two found somewhere else to be for Christmas. Give us some space to celebrate properly. You understand?" Virginia's hand found mine under the counter. "And where?" I asked slowly. "Do you suggest we go?" Kevin shrugged. "A hotel? You have that old cabin somewhere, don't you? Go there. Have a quiet Christmas, just the two of you." Laura appeared in the doorway. I looked at my daughter, waiting for her to say something. She looked at the floor. "Laura," Virginia said softly, "do you agree with this?" The silence stretched for 3 heartbeats. 4. 5. "Kevin's right," Laura finally whispered. "It would just be easier this way." Something shifted in my chest. Not anger. This was different. Colder. More final. Kevin clapped his hands together. "Great. Maybe pack tonight. Mom and Dad arrive tomorrow." He walked out whistling. I stood there, holding a potato peeler in my own kitchen, being told to vacate my own home. Virginia's hand was still in mine. I looked at her. She looked at me. After 45 years of marriage, we didn't need words. I could see the hurt in her eyes, not for herself, but for what our daughter had become. And beneath that hurt, I saw something else. The same steel I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. "Howard," she said quietly, so only I could hear. "The cabin." I nodded slowly. "Yes, the cabin. My father built it with his own hands, 15 miles northeast of town, deep in the forest by the lake. Kevin didn't know it existed. It was ours. Truly ours. "Pack your warmest clothes," I told her. "We're leaving in the morning."
When Kevin said those words, "You understand?" With that dismissive wave of his hand, I felt something crack inside me. Not break. Crack. Like the first fracture in ice before it gives way entirely. I watched my husband's jaw tighten. Howard has never been a man of many words, but I've learned to read the silences between them. 32 years as sheriff taught him to keep his face neutral, his reactions controlled. But his eyes told me everything. We were both thinking the same thing. This is our home. I've spent 45 years building a life in this house, raised my daughter in these rooms, planted roses in that garden, watched them bloom season after season. My preserves line the pantry shelves. Apple butter, strawberry jam, pickled vegetables from my own hands. Every corner holds a memory. And now we were being told to leave. By a man who had contributed nothing but tension since the day he arrived. Laura. My sweet Laura. I remember her as a child, 7 years old, helping me plant tulip bulbs in the front garden. Her little hands covered in dirt, her face lit up with wonder when I explained how something so small could become something so beautiful. "Like magic, Mama," she'd said. "Where did that girl go? I first met Kevin 8 years ago. Laura brought him home for Thanksgiving. So proud, so eager for our approval. He was charming on the surface, good looks, confident handshake, the kind of smile that shows too many teeth. But when he thought no one was watching, his mask slipped. I caught him rolling his eyes when Howard told a story. Saw him checking his phone while Laura talked about her new job. There's something wrong with him, I told Howard that night. He's just young, Howard said. Give him time. But time didn't make Kevin better. It made him bolder. The way he speaks to Laura now, not yelling, nothing so obvious, just small cuts, corrections. That's not how it happened. You're remembering it wrong. Death by 1,000 paper cuts. And Laura just shrinks. Every year, a little smaller, a little quieter. That Sunday evening, after Kevin made his announcement, Howard and I retreated to our bedroom, the one room they hadn't claimed. I sat on the edge of the bed while Howard paced by the window. He wants us out by tomorrow, Howard said, in our own house, for his parents' comfort. I know. And Laura just stood there, our daughter. He stopped pacing. She chose him. Again. I reached for his hand, drew him down to sit beside me. She's lost, Howard. He's got her so turned around she doesn't know which way is up anymore. That doesn't excuse what she's doing to us. No, it doesn't. I paused. But we can't save her by fighting with her. She'll just dig in deeper. Howard was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "The cabin." The cabin. Howard's father built it himself, a small sturdy structure 15 miles outside of town, tucked into the forest near Thompson Lake. We used to go there when Laura was young. Christmas mornings watching the snow fall through pine branches. It was our place. Kevin didn't know it existed. We'd never mentioned it to him. We could go there, Howard continued. Get away from this. Clear our heads. Yes, I said. We'll go to the cabin. But Howard, this isn't just running away. He frowned. What do you mean? We've been reacting to Kevin for 2 years, absorbing his insults, hoping things would get better. They haven't. They won't. So what are you suggesting? I took his weathered hand in both of mine. I'm suggesting that we stop being victims, that we use this time, this Christmas he's trying to take from us, to think, to plan, to figure out how to take back what's ours. Howard studied my face. You have something in mind. Not yet, but I will. I smiled. You always said I was the strategist in this marriage. And I'm the muscle. A hint of his old humour flickered in his eyes. You're the man who spent 3 decades making sure justice was served in this county. He didn't smile, but his shoulders straightened. What about Laura? The hardest question. My daughter. My only child. Laura will have to choose, I said finally. We can't make that choice for her, but we can make sure she sees clearly what, and who, she's choosing between. We spent the next hour making lists, warm clothes, food supplies, documents we might need. Howard mentioned his old friend Gerald Watson, an attorney in town. I thought about Marlene Foster, a former student who now worked at the local newspaper. Ideas began to form. Seeds. The next morning we woke early. I made coffee while Howard loaded the car. We moved quietly, not wanting a confrontation. Not yet. I was in the hallway when I heard footsteps behind me. Kevin stood at the top of the stairs in his bathrobe. Good, you're leaving. Don't forget to leave your house key. Howard's grip tightened on his car keys. I touched his arm gently. Wait. Of course, Kevin, I said smoothly. We wouldn't want your parents to feel unsafe. He yawned. Great. Well, Merry Christmas. Close the door behind you. He shuffled back toward the master bedroom without another word. We stepped outside, into the cold morning air. The sky was lightening over the mountains. Behind us, the front door slammed shut. I heard Kevin's voice from inside. Get out, you old fools. Now we can have a real Christmas. The words hung in the frozen air. Howard's hand found mine. Virginia, he said quietly. I know. I looked at our house, at the home we'd built together, now occupied by someone who saw us as obstacles. Then I looked at my husband, at the fire in his eyes. Let's go to the cabin, I said. We have plans to make.
The drive to Gerald Watson's office took 20 minutes. 20 minutes of silence broken only by the crunch of snow under our tires and the steady rhythm of Virginia's breathing beside me. Gerald and I go back 30 years. He was the county prosecutor when I was a young deputy. We'd worked dozens of cases together, shared countless cups of coffee, attended each other's children's weddings. When I pulled into the parking lot of his small office on Main Street, I saw his old Buick already there. The man still arrived at work before dawn, even at 70. Howard! Gerald met us at the door, his silver eyebrows raised. Virginia, this is unexpected. Come in, come in. His office smelled like old books and coffee, same as it always had. We sat across from his desk while he poured 3 cups from a pot that looked older than my truck. I'll cut straight to it, I said. Kevin's kicked us out of our own house, told us his parents don't want to be around old people for Christmas. Gerald's face didn't change. He'd heard worse in his career. Your house, the one at Cedar Lane, the same. And Laura? Virginia's hand found mine. She went along with it. Gerald set down his coffee cup. I was hoping you'd come see me. I've been concerned for a while now. He opened a drawer and pulled out a manila folder. 3 years ago, Laura came to me. Said you wanted to set up a power of attorney. Just in case, she said, for health emergencies. My stomach dropped. I know. Gerald slid the folder across the desk. Virginia signed it. But Howard, your signature isn't on here, which means legally it only covers Virginia's affairs. And there's something else. I looked at Virginia. Her face had gone pale. The language is broad, Gerald continued. Broader than standard. It gives Laura authority over Virginia's financial decisions, property matters, even medical choices, and it can be activated without a physician's certification of incapacity. Just Laura's judgment that Virginia is unable to manage her affairs. The room went silent. I felt Virginia's hand trembling in mine. I didn't read it carefully, she whispered. Laura said it was routine. She said she manipulated you. The words came out harder than I intended. I took a breath. Someone manipulated you. This wasn't Laura's idea. Gerald nodded slowly. Kevin Brennan has a cousin who practices law in Billings. I made some calls. This document matches his firm's template exactly. Kevin. Of course it was Kevin. Planning this for 3 years while smiling at our dinner table, eating Virginia's cooking, sleeping under our roof. Can we void it? I asked. We can do better than that. Gerald pulled out a legal pad. Virginia is clearly of sound mind. She can revoke the power of attorney immediately. I'll file the paperwork today. But Howard, there's more you should consider. He spent the next hour walking us through our options. Montana law was clear. As property owners, we had every right to evict non-paying tenants. The process would take 30 days after proper notice was served. Kevin and Laura had never paid rent, never signed a lease, never contributed to the mortgage or utilities. They're guests who've overstayed their welcome, Gerald said. Legally speaking, you can't ask them to leave. And if they don't, then we involve the sheriff's department. Gerald smiled grimly. I believe you still have some friends there. By the time we left his office, the sun was climbing over the mountains. Virginia hadn't spoken much, but I could see her mind working. That's how she processes things. Quietly, carefully, putting pieces together. We drove toward the cabin. The road wound through pine forests, past frozen streams and snow-covered meadows. My father had driven this same route 50 years ago, hauling lumber in his old pickup to build the cabin with his own hands. I'm sorry, Virginia said finally, about the power of attorney. I should have. Stop. I reached over and took her hand. Kevin's been planning this for years. He played all of us. But now we know. And now we plan. She was quiet for a moment. Then, Howard, I keep thinking about something Gerald said. About how the whole town knows us. Knows what kind of people we are. And Kevin's been counting on us to stay quiet. To be embarrassed. To slink away and not make a fuss. She turned to look at me, and I saw something new in her eyes. Not hurt anymore. Something sharper. What if we don't stay quiet? The cabin appeared through the trees, small, sturdy, smoke-ready chimney, pointing at the gray sky. Home. Our real home. The one Kevin would never touch. What are you thinking? I asked. Virginia smiled. It wasn't her warm smile, the one that had captured my heart 45 years ago. This was different. This was the smile of a woman who'd stopped being a victim. I'm thinking about Marlene Foster, she said, my former student, the one who writes for the Flathead Beacon. I pulled into the cabin's small clearing and turned off the engine. Snow crunched under our boots as we walked to the door. Tell me more, I said.
The cabin wrapped around us like an old friend. Howard built a fire while I unpacked our bags, and within an hour the small space was warm and glowing. Pine logs crackled in the fireplace. Snow fell gently outside the windows. I stood at the kitchen counter, making soup, and let my mind work through everything Gerald had told us. 3 years. Kevin had been planning this for 3 years. While I served him Christmas dinners and birthday cakes, while I bit my tongue at his comments, he'd been positioning himself to take everything we'd built. The power of attorney burned in my memory. I remembered the day Laura had asked me to sign it. Just paperwork, Mum. Dad's busy, so we'll get his signature later. And I'd trusted her. My own daughter. But that trust had been weaponized. Not by Laura. I couldn't quite believe that yet. But by Kevin, who'd been whispering in her ear for years. Soup's ready, I called. Howard came to the small table and we ate in comfortable silence. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, a plan kept forming. Tell me about Marlene Foster, Howard said finally. She was in my American history class in 1995, bright girl, always asking questions the other students were afraid to ask, the kind of student who makes teaching worthwhile. And now she's a journalist. Features writer for the Flathead Beacon, human interest stories, community events. I paused, remembering. She wrote a piece last year about a veteran in Columbia Falls being taken advantage of by his own family. The story went statewide. People donated money. Volunteers showed up. The family backed off completely. Howard leaned back in his chair. You want to go public with this? I want people to know the truth. I took his hand across the table. We've spent 2 years protecting Laura's reputation, keeping quiet about how Kevin treats us. And where did it get us? Thrown out of our own home 3 days before Christmas. What about Laura? The hardest question. Always the hardest question. Laura will have to face the consequences of her choices, I said slowly. Maybe that's what she needs. To see what Kevin has turned her into. To wake up. Howard was quiet for a long moment. The fire crackled. Wind whispered against the windows. Gerald said eviction takes 30 days, he said finally. Kevin could do a lot of damage in 30 days, which is why we need more than legal action. I walked to the window, watching the snow fall on the frozen lake beyond. Kevin's weakness is his pride, his image. Everything he does is about proving he's successful, important, better than us. So we hit him where it hurts. I turned to face my husband. We tell the truth, simply and honestly. An elderly couple, married 45 years, thrown out at Christmas by their son-in-law, who wanted to impress his wealthy parents. I allowed myself a small smile. How does that story play in Flathead County? Howard stood and joined me at the window, his arm wrapped around my shoulders, warm and steady. You've thought this through. I've had 2 years of watching Kevin operate. He believes we're weak, that we'll be too embarrassed to fight back, that we'll just fade away quietly. But we won't. No. I leaned into his warmth. We won't. The next morning I called Marlene Foster. She answered on the second ring, and when I identified myself, her voice warmed immediately. Mrs. Harrison, it's been years. How are you? I've been better, Marlene. I'm hoping you might have time to meet with Howard and me. We have a story to tell. Professional interest replaced warmth. What kind of story? A family matter that's gotten out of hand, the kind you covered with Mr. Patterson. A long pause. Where are you now, Mrs. Harrison? At our cabin, near Thompson Lake. I can be there tomorrow morning, Christmas Eve. She paused. Will you be all right until then? I looked at Howard, adding another log to the fire. At the folder of documents from Gerald sitting on the counter. At this small cabin that Kevin didn't even know existed. We'll be fine, Marlene. We have everything we need. Howard raised an eyebrow when I hung up. She's coming tomorrow, I said. He nodded slowly. Then for the first time since Kevin's ultimatum, my husband smiled, really smiled. Well then, we'd better have a good story to tell. We spent the rest of the day preparing, gathering documents, writing down dates and incidents, every bill we'd paid, every time Kevin had insulted us in our own home, every moment our daughter had looked away while her husband demeaned us. By evening we had a complete picture, 2 years of exploitation, documented and organised. There's one more thing, Howard said. He pulled out his phone and showed me a recording. Kevin's voice unmistakable. Get out, you old fools. Now we can have a real Christmas. I stared at him. You recorded that? I've been recording him for months, just in case. He shrugged. Old habits from my days wearing a badge. Something shifted in my chest. Hope, maybe. Or determination. We weren't helpless. We weren't victims. We were 2 people who'd spent a lifetime building something real. Howard, I said softly. Yes? I love you. He pulled me close. I love you too. Now let's make sure Kevin Brennan never forgets who he's dealing with. Outside, the snow kept falling. Tomorrow Marlene would arrive. And after that, Kevin would learn that some battles aren't won with money or manipulation. Some battles are won with truth.
Marlene Foster arrived the next morning, Christmas Eve, driving a beat-up Subaru with a press badge dangling from the rearview mirror. She was a woman in her early 50s now, but I could still see the eager student Virginia had described. Bright eyes, quick movements, a notebook already in her hand before she'd even stepped out of the car. Mr. Harrison, she shook my hand firmly. Mrs. Harrison, thank you for reaching out. Thank you for coming on such short notice, Virginia said, especially today. Marlene smiled. News doesn't wait for holidays. And honestly, when Mrs. Harrison called, I knew this had to be something important. She was the best teacher I ever had. I watched Virginia's face soften at that. Even after everything, she still lit up when former students remembered her kindly. That warmth in her eyes reminded me why I'd fallen in love with her 45 years ago. We brought Marlene inside. The cabin was warm, the fire crackling, the smell of Virginia's apple pie filling the small space. We decorated modestly, a small tree in the corner, some garland Virginia had brought from the house before we left. It looked like what it was, a cozy refuge for two people who had nowhere else to go. Marlene noticed everything. Her eyes swept the room, taking in the modest furnishings, the handmade quilts my mother had sewn decades ago, my woodworking projects arranged on a shelf by the window. "May I?" She gestured toward a carved bear, one of my favorites. "Go ahead." She picked it up carefully, turning it in her hands. "This is beautiful work, Mr. Harrison." "Thank you. I make them for the children's shelter in town. Have for 20 years now. Every Christmas, I bring a box of toys over there." This year, I paused. I hadn't thought about that. The toys were still in my workshop, in the house. Kevin's house now, apparently. This year might be different, I admitted. Marlene set down the bear and pulled out her notebook. "Tell me what happened." So we did. Virginia started from the beginning. Laura's marriage to Kevin 8 years ago. Their move into our home 2 years ago when Kevin lost his job. I filled in the details she missed. Kevin's gradual takeover of our household, his comments about old people, the way he'd rearranged my workshop without asking, as if he already owned the place. The time he told Virginia her cooking was too heavy for his sophisticated palate. The way he changed the locks on the front door without telling us. Marlene wrote quickly, her pen scratching across the paper. Occasionally she'd stop us to ask a clarifying question, but mostly she just listened. I could see her face change as the story unfolded, from professional interest to disbelief to quiet outrage. When we got to the ultimatum, Kevin telling us to leave our own home so his parents wouldn't be uncomfortable, Marlene's pen stopped moving entirely. She looked up at us with something between disbelief and controlled anger. "He actually said that? In your own house?" "In our own kitchen," I confirmed, while I was helping my wife prepare for Christmas dinner. The same kitchen where we taught Laura to bake cookies. The same kitchen where we've celebrated 45 Christmases together. "And your daughter?" Virginia's voice was steady, but I heard the crack beneath it. "She went along with it. She said it would be easier this way." Marlene was quiet for a long moment. I could see her processing what we'd told her, fitting the pieces together the way a good journalist does. Then she said, "I'd like to take some photographs. Would that be all right?" We agreed. She photographed everything. The cabin, the decorations, Virginia's pie cooling on the counter, my wood carvings lined up on the shelf. She had me hold up one of my carved toys while Virginia stood by the window with her hands folded. She photographed our modest Christmas dinner for two, already laid out on the small table. Far cry from the elaborate feast Virginia had been planning to prepare in our own home. "This story," Marlene said finally, putting away her camera, "this is going on the front page. Tomorrow morning." "Christmas Day?" I asked. "Christmas Day." She met my eyes directly. "Mr. Harrison, you and your wife are pillars of this community. You served this county for over 3 decades as sheriff. Mrs. Harrison taught half the adults in Kalispell how to think about history, about citizenship, about being good people. And your son-in-law threw you out of your own home for Christmas because his parents are uncomfortable around elderly people." She shook her head. "People need to know about this, not for revenge, but because it matters. Because if this can happen to you, it can happen to anyone. And maybe, just maybe, if enough people see what's happening to families like yours, we can start having a real conversation about how we treat our elders." After Marlene left, Virginia and I sat by the fire. The afternoon light was fading, snow falling gently outside the windows, the pine trees turning to shadows. "Are you ready for what comes next?" Virginia asked quietly. I thought about Kevin, probably lounging in our living room right now, entertaining his wealthy parents, drinking our wine, sleeping in our bed. I thought about Laura, who'd chosen her husband's comfort over her own family. "I've been ready for 2 years," I said. "Just didn't know it until now." Virginia reached over and took my hand. Her fingers were warm against mine. "Tomorrow everything changes," she said. "Tomorrow," I agreed. "Kevin Brennan learns that actions have consequences." We sat together in comfortable silence as the fire crackled and the snow kept falling. Our 45th Christmas together. Not how we'd planned to spend it, but somehow, despite everything, it felt right. We had each other. We had a plan. And in the morning, the whole county would know our story.
I woke to the sound of my phone ringing. The cabin was still dark, only a faint grey light seeping through the windows. I fumbled for my phone on the nightstand, squinting at the screen. The time read 6:47 a.m. Kevin Brennan. I took a breath, steadied myself, then answered. "What is this?" Kevin's voice was high, almost hysterical. "What the actual... Virginia, why are you in the newspaper?" I sat up slowly. Howard was already awake beside me, watching with raised eyebrows. "Merry Christmas, Kevin," I said calmly. "Don't you Merry Christmas me? The Flathead Beacon, front page, Christmas for two. How an elderly couple was thrown out of their own home before the holidays. There's a picture of you and Howard looking all sad in some cabin. My mother is having a breakdown. My father is demanding to know what's going on." I let him rant for a moment longer, then said quietly, "Is Laura there?" That stopped him. "What?" "Laura, our daughter. Is she there?" Yes, she's... That's not the point. The point is you've humiliated us. You've gone to the press. What were you thinking?" "I was thinking," I said slowly, "that the truth deserves to be heard. Wouldn't you agree?" Silence on the other end. I could picture Kevin's face, the flush of anger, the dawning realization that his perfect Christmas was crumbling around him. "My parents are leaving," he said finally. His voice had gone cold. "They're packing right now. They refuse to stay in a house that's at the center of a media scandal. They think I'm some kind of... elder abuser," I suggested. "I believe that's the term Marlene used in the article." Howard's hand found mine under the blankets. I could feel him shaking with suppressed laughter. "This isn't over," Kevin hissed. "This is far from over. You have no idea what you've done." "Actually, Kevin, I think we know exactly what we've done. We told the truth, and now everyone else knows it too." I hung up. Howard and I looked at each other. Then we both burst out laughing, the kind of laughter that comes from years of tension finally releasing, from watching a bully finally face consequences. "His parents are leaving," Howard said, wiping his eyes, "on Christmas morning. The scandal is too much for their delicate sensibilities." "Oh, the irony." Howard shook his head. "Kevin threw us out so his parents wouldn't be uncomfortable around old people. And now they're leaving because they're uncomfortable around him." We got out of bed and made coffee. Outside, the Christmas morning sun was just beginning to paint the mountains gold. The phone calls started around 8. First, our neighbour Nancy Cole. "Virginia, Howard. We just read the article. We had no idea things had gotten so bad. What can we do?" Then Howard's former deputy, Bill Rawlings. Howard, I'm so sorry. If there's anything you need, anything at all." Then my former colleague from the school, Sandra Chen. "Virginia, I'm organising a meal train. You shouldn't have to worry about food while you're dealing with this." By mid-morning, we'd received calls from more than 20 people. Former students, old friends, fellow members of the community organisations we'd belonged to for decades. Everyone was outraged. Everyone wanted to help. And that was just the beginning. By noon, the online version of Marlene's article had been shared over 1,000 times. Comments poured in, most expressing shock and sympathy, some sharing their own stories of family exploitation, a few calling for boycotts of Kevin's company. "Have you seen this?" Howard showed me his phone. A community Facebook group, Support the Harrisons, had been created. It already had 300 members. My phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed Laura's name. I hesitated. Howard noticed. "You don't have to answer," he said gently. "Yes," I said. "I do." I accepted the call. Hello, Laura. Mum. Her voice was small, wavering. Mum, I never meant for what, Laura? For things to go this far? For your father and me to spend Christmas alone in a cabin because your husband thinks we're embarrassing? Kevin said, he told me his parents were uncomfortable and I thought you'd understand. I understand perfectly. My voice was steady, but my heart was breaking. This was my daughter, my only child. And yet, I understand that you chose your husband's comfort over your parents' dignity. I understand that when Kevin told us to leave our own home, you stood there and said nothing. Mum, please. Laura, I love you. I will always love you. But right now, I need you to understand something very clearly. I took a breath. Your father and I are done being pushed aside. We're done being treated like inconveniences in our own lives. If you want to be part of our family again, you're going to have to make some choices. Real choices. Not just apologize and expect everything to go back to normal. Silence. I could hear her breathing, could picture the tears running down her face. I don't know what to do, she whispered finally. That's something you'll have to figure out for yourself. I hung up. Howard put his arm around me. That was hard, he said. It was necessary. I leaned into his warmth. She needs to understand that actions have consequences. Kevin isn't the only one who forgot that. Outside, the snow sparkled in the Christmas sunshine. Our phones kept buzzing with messages of support. Somewhere in Kalispell, Kevin Brennan was watching his carefully constructed world fall apart. And here in our little cabin, Howard and I held each other close. The first strike had landed, but the battle was far from over.
The day after Christmas, the chaos truly began. I sat at the cabin's small kitchen table, scrolling through my phone while Virginia made breakfast. The online version of Marlene's article had exploded overnight. Over 2,000 shares now. The comments section had grown into something I never expected. Listen to this, I said. Someone named Mary Kellerman wrote, Sheriff Harrison married my cousin back in '84. He's one of the most decent men I've ever known. If his own son-in-law treated him this way, we need to ask ourselves what's happening to families in this country. Virginia set a plate of eggs in front of me. Is that making you uncomfortable? The attention. A little, I admitted. But you know what? For 2 years I stayed quiet while Kevin Brennan treated us like unwanted furniture in our own home. If speaking up means people talk about it, so be it. My phone rang. The caller ID showed a familiar name. Tom Murphy. Tom and I went back 40 years. He'd been a young rancher when I was starting out as a deputy, and we'd worked together on several cattle theft cases. These days he owned Murphy Agricultural Equipment, one of the biggest farm equipment dealers in Flathead County, and Kevin Brennan's employer. Howard, Tom's voice was gruff, the way it always was. I just read the article in the Beacon. Is this true? Kevin Brennan, your son-in-law, threw you out of your own house for Christmas? Every word, Tom. A long pause. I hired that man 3 years ago. He came in with his fancy degree and his big city ideas. Charming as anything. I had no idea he was married to your daughter. Laura kept her maiden name professionally, and Kevin doesn't exactly advertise his connection to provincial folk like us. Tom made a sound that might have been a laugh or a growl. Howard, I'd like to meet with you, face to face. Can you come to my office tomorrow morning? I'll be there. After I hung up, Virginia looked at me with raised eyebrows. Tom Murphy, I said, Kevin's boss. He wants to talk. About Kevin? I imagine so. I felt something stir in my chest. Not quite satisfaction, but close. Seems Kevin's carefully constructed image is developing some cracks. The phone calls and messages continued throughout the day. Our neighbor, Nancy Cole, a woman who'd organized everything from church bake sales to town hall meetings, called to say she was starting a petition for our right to return home. She already had 40 signatures. This isn't right, Nancy said, her voice tight with indignation. You and Virginia have lived in that house longer than most of us have been in the neighborhood, and some out-of-town smooth-talker thinks he can just push you out? We appreciate the support, Nancy, more than you know. Support? Howard, this is war, and I've organized enough fundraisers to know how to mobilize a community. By late afternoon, the Facebook group Virginia had mentioned, Support the Harrisons, had grown to over 500 members. Someone had posted the article with a highlighted quote from Kevin. My parents aren't comfortable around elderly people. The comment beneath it read simply, what kind of person says this? A good question, one I'd been asking myself for 8 years. Around 4 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I opened it to find a photograph, a screenshot of what looked like an internal company email. The subject line read, Urgent, Kevin Brennan's situation. The text beneath it, thought you'd want to see this. A friend. I showed Virginia. She read it slowly, her face unreadable. Someone at Murphy's company leaked this to you, she said. Looks that way. Kevin has made enemies. Kevin has made nothing but enemies. I set down the phone. He's just been too arrogant to notice. That evening we sat by the fire, planning our next moves. Gerald had called earlier to confirm that the eviction paperwork was ready to be served. Under Montana law, Kevin and Laura had 30 days to vacate once they received notice. 30 days, Virginia murmured. It feels both too long and too short. It's the law. We play by the rules. That's what separates us from Kevin. She reached over and took my hand. Are you worried about Laura? I thought about my daughter, about the little girl who used to sit on my lap while I carved wooden animals, her eyes wide with wonder, about the woman she'd become, someone I barely recognized. I'm worried she won't wake up, I said finally. I'm worried Kevin's got such a hold on her that even this won't be enough. She called me on Christmas Day. After Kevin's meltdown, I turned to look at Virginia. You didn't mention that. Her voice was shaking, Howard. She was scared. Not of us, of what's happening, of what she's realized she's become part of. Before I could respond, my phone rang again. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Dad? Laura's voice, small and trembling. Dad, it's me. I need to talk to you. Both of you. Please. I looked at Virginia. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. We're listening, Laura, I said. We're here.
Laura's voice through the phone speaker was barely recognizable. Gone was the defensive edge, the rehearsed excuses. In its place was something raw. Something broken. I didn't know, she kept saying. I swear I didn't know it would go this far. Howard and I sat side by side on the cabin's worn couch, the phone between us. Outside, the evening shadows were lengthening across the snow, painting the trees in shades of purple and grey. What didn't you know, Laura? I asked gently. About the power of attorney, about Kevin's plans. A ragged breath. He told me it was just for emergencies. He said if anything ever happened to you and Dad, we needed to be able to make decisions quickly. I didn't read the fine print. I trusted him. Howard's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent. This was my daughter, my territory. And throwing us out of our own home for Christmas, I said, was that also something you didn't know about? Silence then, in a whisper. I knew, and I didn't stop him. Why? Because, her voice cracked, because Kevin said it was the only way. His parents are so critical, so judgmental. He said if they saw you and Dad, they'd think less of us, of him. And I wanted to keep the peace. I wanted everyone to be happy. Everyone except us. Mum, please. Laura. I kept my voice steady, though my heart was aching. Your father and I love you. We have loved you since the moment you were born. But love doesn't mean we accept being treated as disposable, as embarrassments to be hidden away. I know that now. She was crying openly. Mum, Kevin's parents left this morning. They couldn't even look at him. The neighbours are staring. Someone left a printed copy of the article on our doorstep with the word shame written across it in red marker. And Kevin, he's been pacing the house for hours, calling lawyers, trying to figure out how to fix this. He hasn't spoken to me except to blame me for everything. Howard shifted beside me. I could feel his anger building, but he held it in check. 45 years of marriage had taught us when to speak, and when to listen. That sounds like Kevin, I said, always looking for someone else to blame. What do I do? Laura's voice was desperate. Mum, what do I do? This was the moment, the crossroads I'd been waiting for and dreading. You have a choice to make, Laura. You can stand by your husband while he fights to keep control of a situation he created. Or you can start thinking about what kind of person you want to be. We're serving eviction papers, I continued. Tomorrow. Gerald Watson has everything ready. Under Montana law, you and Kevin have 30 days to leave our house. Mum! The shock in her voice was palpable. You can't. This is our home now. It's our house, Laura. Your father bought it in 1978. We paid off the mortgage. We've paid every utility bill, every property tax, every repair cost for the past 2 years while you and Kevin lived there, rent-free. It has always been our home, and it's time we took it back. I heard Howard exhale slowly beside me. This was harder than anything I'd ever done. Harder than watching my mother die. Harder than the years of Kevin's subtle cruelties. This was telling my only child that she had to choose. The power of attorney has been revoked, I continued. I signed the papers yesterday. Your father and I are taking back our lives, Laura. The question is whether you want to be part of them. I need time, Laura said finally, her voice small. I need to think. You have time, but not forever. I paused. We love you, Laura. That has never changed and never will. But we will not be doormats anymore. Not for Kevin, and not for you, if you choose to stand with him. After we hung up, Howard pulled me close. Neither of us spoke for a long moment. The fire crackled softly. Somewhere outside, an owl called into the darkness. That was the hardest thing you've ever done, he said quietly. It was necessary. I know. I'm proud of you, Virginia. Prouder than I've ever been. We sat there as the fire crackled and the night deepened. Tomorrow, Gerald would serve the eviction papers. The 30-day clock would start ticking. Kevin tried calling 3 times that evening. We didn't answer. His voicemails grew increasingly frantic, threats about lawsuits, then pleading about working this out like family, then more threats about destroying our reputation. Howard documented each one, saving them to his phone with timestamps. Evidence, he said grimly, just in case he tries anything. A man like Kevin doesn't go down without a fight. Around 10, a text arrived from Nancy Cole. Petition is at 127 signatures. Town Hall has agreed to hold a community meeting next week about elder rights. You two have started something important. I showed it to Howard. He smiled, that quiet, satisfied smile I loved. We didn't start anything, he said. We just told the truth. The community did the rest. As we prepared for bed, I looked around the cabin, this small, sturdy place that Howard's father had built with his own hands. It had become our sanctuary, our command post, our home, in a way the house on Cedar Lane hadn't felt in years. Whatever happens, I told Howard, we face it together. Always, he said. That's how it's been for 45 years. That's how it'll be for however many we have left. Outside, the Montana stars blazed bright and cold. Inside, the fire burned low and my husband held my hand. Tomorrow, the next phase would begin. Kevin would receive his notice. Laura would have to choose. And we, Howard and I, would keep fighting for the dignity we'd almost forgotten we deserved.
3 weeks after Christmas, I drove into town to meet Tom Murphy. His office sat on the second floor of the Murphy Agricultural Equipment Building, a sprawling complex on the edge of Kalispell that employed over 100 people. I'd been here before, years ago, when Tom had needed help with a theft investigation. Back then, Kevin Brennan wasn't even a name I knew. Funny how life circles around. Tom met me at the door himself. He was a big man, weathered by decades of Montana winters, with hands that had worked ranches long before they signed paychecks. We shook hands the way men do when words aren't necessary. "Coffee?" he asked. "Please." We settled into his office, a no-nonsense room with cattle photographs on the walls and a desk piled with invoices. Tom poured 2 cups from a pot that smelled strong enough to wake the dead. "I'll get straight to it, Howard." Tom leaned back in his chair. "Kevin Brennan has been one of my mid-level managers for 3 years. He came in with an MBA and a lot of big ideas about modernizing our sales approach. Charming fellow, good with numbers. But I run a family business. My grandfather started this company in 1952. We've survived because people trust us. Farmers, ranchers, they buy from Murphy because they know we stand behind our word." Tom's jaw tightened. "When I read that article about what Brennan did to you in Virginia, that's not someone I want representing my company." I set down my coffee cup. "Tom, I didn't come here to ask you to fire Kevin." "I know you didn't. That's why I'm telling you what I've already decided." He met my eyes. "I called Brennan into my office yesterday, gave him a choice, resign quietly or be terminated for conduct unbecoming. He has until the end of the week." I felt something settle in my chest. Not triumph, something quieter, closer to resolution. "What did he say?" Tom snorted. "He tried to explain. Said it was a family misunderstanding, that the article exaggerated things. I told him I've known you for 40 years, Howard. I've seen you stand up for this community more times than I can count. If you say something happened, it happened." "I appreciate that, Tom." "Nothing to appreciate, it's just the truth." He paused. "There's something else you should know. Brennan's been talking around town, trying to spin the story, make himself look like the victim. But it's not working. People here know you. They know Virginia, and they've seen the article. When I left Tom's office, the winter sun was bright on the snow-covered streets. I drove back to the cabin thinking about justice, about how it sometimes comes not in courtrooms, but in the quiet decisions of ordinary people who refuse to tolerate cruelty. Virginia was waiting for me on the cabin's porch, 2 cups of hot cocoa in her hands. She'd always had a way of knowing when I needed comfort. "How did it go?" she asked. "Kevin's out by the end of the week. Tom made the decision before I even got there." She nodded slowly, her eyes searching my face. "How do you feel?" I thought about it. Really thought. Like we did the right thing. Not the easy thing, but the right thing. She handed me a cup and we sat together on the porch, watching the afternoon light play across the mountains. This was what Kevin had tried to take from us. Not just a house, but this. These quiet moments. This peace. The weeks that followed brought more of the same. The community rallied around us in ways I never expected. Nancy Cole's petition reached over 300 signatures. The town hall meeting on elder rights drew a standing room-only crowd. Virginia received letters from former students across the state, all expressing outrage and support. One letter particularly moved her, from a woman named Sarah Jenkins, who'd been in Virginia's history class 20 years ago. "Mrs. Harrison," she wrote, "you taught me that ordinary people can change history when they stand up for what's right. I never forgot that lesson, and now you're proving it all over again." And through it all, Kevin Brennan's world continued to crumble. He'd resigned from Murphy. By mutual agreement, according to the official announcement. His parents in Billings had reportedly told him not to come home, at least not until the scandal died down. The wealthy image he'd cultivated so carefully was falling apart like wet paper. The 30-day eviction deadline came and went. Gerald filed the necessary paperwork, and the sheriff's department, my old department, sent a deputy to ensure compliance. Kevin had no choice but to leave. Virginia and I didn't move back in right away. The cabin had become too precious to abandon entirely. But we visited the house on Cedar Lane, walked through the rooms, reclaimed what was ours. It was a quiet victory, the best kind. Then, one evening in mid-February, we heard a car pulling up the cabin's gravel drive. Virginia and I exchanged a look. We weren't expecting anyone. I stepped onto the porch and saw a rental sedan, the kind of anonymous vehicle someone from out of town might drive. 2 figures emerged. One I recognized immediately. Laura, our daughter, bundled against the cold. The other was Kevin. He looked different, smaller somehow. The arrogance that had defined him was gone, replaced by something hollow. His eyes were red-rimmed. His expensive coat hung loose on shoulders that had lost their confident set. Laura walked toward us, leaving Kevin standing by the car. Her face was pale but determined. "Mom! Dad!" Her voice trembled. We need to talk, please. I looked at Virginia. She gave me a slight nod. Come inside, I said. Both of you.
The four of us sat in the cabin's small living room, Howard and I on the worn couch, Laura in the armchair by the window, Kevin standing awkwardly by the door as if he might bolt at any moment. The fire crackled. Outside, evening shadows were deepening across the snow. "Well," Howard said finally, his voice flat. "You're here." Kevin cleared his throat. "Mr. Harrison, Mrs. Harrison, I want to apologize." I watched him carefully. After decades of teaching, I'd learned to read faces, to spot the difference between genuine remorse and rehearsed performance. Kevin's eyes kept darting to Laura, checking her reaction. His hands fidgeted at his sides. This wasn't repentance. This was desperation. "Go on," I said quietly. "I made mistakes. I know that now. The whole Christmas situation, I handled it badly. I was under pressure from my parents and I took it out on you. That wasn't fair." "Wasn't fair," Howard repeated. "That's an interesting way to describe throwing two people out of their own home." Kevin's jaw tightened. For a moment I saw a flash of the old arrogance. Then it faded. "I've lost my job," he said. "My parents won't speak to me. The whole town thinks I'm some kind of monster. Haven't I been punished enough?" Howard stood slowly, and even at 68, he still had the bearing of the sheriff he'd once been. "You wanted our home, Kevin. You wanted to push us aside and take what we'd built. You manipulated our daughter into helping you. You had her trick Virginia into signing papers that could have ruined us." His voice went cold. "And now you come here asking if you've been punished enough?" Kevin took a step back. "Here's what I think," Howard continued. "I think you're not sorry for what you did. I think you're sorry you got caught. I think if that article had never been written, you'd still be sitting in our living room planning how to get our house in your name. That's not. You can take your apology and go back to wherever you came from. But you won't take our home, you won't take our dignity, and you won't take our daughter." Kevin's face had gone white. He looked at Laura desperately. Laura didn't move. I touched Howard's arm gently. "Kevin, you should go now." Kevin stared at Laura. "Laura, come on, let's go." Laura shook her head slowly. "No, Kevin." "What?" "I'm staying." Her voice trembled but held firm. "I'm staying to talk to my parents. Alone." Kevin's face twisted with disbelief. "You can't be serious. After everything I've done for you." "Everything you've done for me?" Laura's voice suddenly had an edge I hadn't heard in years. "You isolated me from my friends. You controlled our money. You made me think my own parents were the problem. And when I finally see the truth, you're still trying to make me choose you over them. I've made my choice, Kevin. I should have made it a long time ago." For a moment, Kevin stood frozen. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. No words came out. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out. The door slammed behind him. Through the window, I watched him drive away into the winter darkness. The cabin was silent. Then Laura began to cry, deep, racking sobs. I crossed the room and held her the way I had when she was a child, waking from nightmares. "I'm sorry," she kept saying. "I was so blind. I let him control everything. I let him turn me into someone I didn't recognize." Howard's hand rested on Laura's shoulder. "It's not too late to change that." We talked long into the night. Laura told us things she'd never admitted before, how Kevin had isolated her from friends, controlled their finances, made her doubt her own perceptions. "When I saw that article," she said, "it was like waking up from a terrible dream I didn't even know I was having." The next morning, Laura drove to a lawyer's office in Kalispell. The divorce papers were filed within the week. Spring came slowly to Montana that year. The snow melted, the days lengthened, and life began returning to something better than normal. Howard and I moved back into our house on Cedar Lane. We repainted the walls, rearranged the furniture, reclaimed every corner that Kevin had tried to make his own. My roses were still there, waiting beneath the winter mulch, ready to bloom again. Laura visited often. She was staying with a friend in town while the divorce was finalized. She looked different now, lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. I'm thinking of going back to school, she told us one Sunday afternoon. Maybe finish that teaching degree I started before I met Kevin. I smiled, feeling warmth spread through my chest. You'd make a wonderful teacher, Laura. As for Kevin, we heard he'd gone to Billings, then to some city further east, starting over, presumably, in a place where no one knew what he'd done. I hoped for his sake that he'd learned something, but people like Kevin rarely do. The cabin in the mountains remained our sanctuary. Howard and I spent weekends there, sitting by the fire, watching the sunset paint the peaks gold and pink. It had saved us, that little place, given us room to breathe, to think, to plan, to remember who we were. On one of those evenings, as spring was turning to summer, Howard reached over and took my hand. We did it, he said simply. We did it together, I replied, the way we've done everything for 45 years. He smiled, that quiet, satisfied smile I'd loved since the moment I met him at the county fair, all those years ago. Virginia, he said, I think we've earned a vacation. What do you say we take a road trip this summer? See some places we've always talked about? I looked at my husband, at this man who had stood by me through everything, who had fought beside me when fighting was needed, and held me when holding was what I needed instead. I'd like that, I said. I'd like that very much. Outside, the first stars were appearing over the mountains. The fire crackled softly. Sometimes justice comes not with thunder, but with silence. The sweetest victory isn't defeating your enemies. It's remembering who you are and who you love and holding on to both with everything you have. Howard squeezed my hand. I squeezed back. Sometimes justice comes quietly, like dawn after a long, dark night.
If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.